I think the guy sounds like a jerk. Jerky McJerkface. Walter Hagen is where I see it. Welcome, I'm your host, Michael Wolf, and this is Office Hours, presented by Holderness Bourne. Today we're going to talk about the PGA Championship. It's not the oldest, it's not the youngest, it's not the first, it's not the last. It's the middle child of major championship golf, but you know what? It's still important. It's still major. I always love the majors. I always love the Masters. I always love the British Open. I love the US Open, except when they played at Torrey Pines. PGA Championship, sometimes hot, sometimes a little lukewarm on it. This year's is going to be great. So let's talk about the PGA of America. PGA of America, founded in 1916, group of club pros got together trying to figure out how to, better protect their interests, what was going on in the teaching professional game and among the better golfers. At the time, it was basically the de facto PGA Tour as well. Among others, A.W. Tillinghast, the golf course architect, was one of those who was involved in the founding. And he was the one that lobbied that the PGA should be separate from the USGA. And you know what? 107 years later, we're still there. The PGA of America formed in 1916. That very same year, they want to have their own championship. Why not? PGA Championship starts in 1916. The event, match play, and it's modeled under a great event in Great Britain at the time, which was called the News of the World Tournament, which was 32 players, 18-hole, 36-hole match play event. Okay, so over the years, format changes a little bit. The important thing, from 1916 to 1957, it was match play. It's the only major championship that it was conducted under match play rules. I personally like match play. Some years it was a 32-person field, some years 64, then back to 32. The final 2 years, in 1956 and 1957, it was 128 people match play. So you had to win 7 matches to win the whole thing. They moved it around a lot, but it was primarily up in the eastern corner. It was, for a long time, the PGA Championship was kind of the East Championship. It was held 13 times in New York, 11 times in Ohio, 9 times in Pennsylvania. To this day, it's only been held 3 times in Texas and 5 times in California, which is a little unusual. And one of the unusual things, too, that's going to be interesting to watch going forward is now that, they've moved it from an August to a May, that's going to limit some of the spots that they can have as well, where they can host it. They've gotten crazy at times. It's definitely the most unorthodox of any of the majors. 1971, not only did they hold it in February, they held it in Florida. Jack Nicklaus crushed the field there. He was winning after all 4 rounds. But yeah, 1971 PGA Championship in February. So, is it going to stay forever in May? We'll see. But kind of interesting what they got going on over there. So we can't talk about the PGA Championship without talking about Walter Hagen. He won 5 of them. Tied with Jack Nicklaus for the most that have won 5. Walter Hagen, I think, kind of adds to his mystique that he was still winning his while they were match play, and he kind of became known as this guy who was just kind of a flamboyant figure and a battler, and especially when it came to match play, that he was just tough to play head to head. But Walter Hagen is also one of those guys, if you like golf, you've heard his name, he was good, but exactly how good was he? When did he play? Was he one of those guys that played with the wood clubs? Did he play with steel shafts? Walter Hagen was born in 1892. Francis Ouimet was born in 1893. So Hagen is 6 months older than Ouimet. Bobby Jones is about 10 years younger. Bobby Jones was born in 1902. He became a note card guy, right? We know about what we say about our note card guys. They've won so many tournaments. I had to write them all down on a note card. Wins the US Open in 1914. He wins a second US Open in 1919. In 1921, he wins his first PGA Championship. In 1922, he wins the first Open Championship. Then he wins it again in 24, plus he wins a PGA in 24. That PGA Championship that he won in 1924 was the first of 4 straight PGA Championships that Walter Hagen won. So 4 times in a row, he wins a PGA Championship, all in the match play format. Tough to beat. He adds 2 more Opens, British Opens, in 1928 and 1929. So he ends with a tally of, depending on how you're counting, 11 major championships. 2 US Opens, 4 British Opens, 5 PGAs. Depending on your feelings in the Western Open, it was certainly a high-quality golf tournament at that time, especially before the Masters came on. He won 5 Western Opens as well. So he's got 11 major championships under the standard ones that we consider today. If you're willing to give him the Westerns, which I'm not, but that's 16, and that's pretty darn good for Mr. Walter Hagen. Besides being really good at golf and helping to kind of reinvent or invent the role of the modern golf touring professional, he also had this persona that everybody knows about, right? He's rolling up for tee times late. He's stepping out of Rolls Royces right under the first tee. He's got champagne in one hand and he's got a pretty girl in his arm. I don't love it. Start with the basics. Show up on time, people, right? Nobody likes the guy in your foursome who's late for everything. You're supposed to be somewhere. Let's say you're, supposed to be meeting to go play St. Andrews, on time. Let's make sure you're there and dressed when you're ready to go when you're supposed to. If I'm supposed to play a match against you and we say we're playing at 1 o'clock and you show up to the first tee at 1:45 p.m. in a Rolls Royce, you better have your little fancy Rolls Royce drive out to about the 3rd fairway, because that's where I'm going to be, and you're going to be 3 down. Some crazy stories around him too that, I guess when told one way, they seem charming. When you see some of the details, not so charming for old Walter Hagen. He got in this crazy New York Stock Exchange situation. He was going to buy a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. These rich guys going to give him a bunch of money, and he's kind of capitalized on his notoriety to fundraise for this stuff. It maybe a pump and dump. It failed right away. That was in 1920. It was around that time that his first wife filed for divorce. Under the claim of abandonment of her family. We flash forward to 1929. We've got Edna. She files for divorce. It's a knockdown, drag-out divorce, but later comes to light he hasn't made any child support payments on his son in 12 years. Don't love that at all. 1957, just another example. He gets a cash advance to write his autobiography, spends all the money, but doesn't write it. They're heckling him to produce his autobiography. Finally, he gets somebody to ghostwrite the autobiography, and then he gets them to print the copies of the book, and forward him the books with the idea that he's going to sell them to people and then he'll pay back the publisher once he sells the books. He sells the books, keeps the money, never pays the publisher. They got to chase him down forever. Last but not least, in like the later stage of his life when, let's hope a little wisdom and maturity, he starts a relationship with what seems like a pretty nice lady named Doris Brandis. He finds out, he's got all kinds of health issues. He's got throat cancer and things like that. He takes out a marriage license because he's never married Doris. He wants to make it official so she can, be a beneficiary and all those things. Never follows through, never signs the marriage license that he had taken out, never sends it in. Walter's son shows up after he's dead. He disputes the will. Poor Doris gets mostly shut out. She's got to sell the house they lived in and goes and ends up living with a series of friends and stuff like that because Walter never made it legitimate with the wife. So Walter Hagen, integral part of the PGA Championship, heck of a golfer, obviously. I'm glad he was happy with his fancy lifestyle and stuff because I'm not buying it. I say Walter Hagen, no thanks. Quick commercial break. We got to pay some bills around here. Also, I want to share some advice, which is Holderness Bourne. Great stuff. They make me look like a supermodel. You know that, I know that. Today, I'm wearing the Anderson white golf shirt, and I got my King vest on, the Cabo vest. I think this is the move for the PGA at Oak Hill. Don't really know what the weather's gonna be. A lot of talk about the weather up there. This is a pretty good combination, right? Keeps the cool side cool, keeps the warm side warm. You can play golf in it, plenty of room to move. You know what I like best about Holderness Bourne though? I'll let you guys on a little secret. I do all the laundry in this house. Not all heroes wear capes. Some of them wear Holderness Bourne. And I've got 2 teenage boys that are right now about the equivalent of feral zebras. So how do I keep on top of all this laundry? With Holderness Bourne, I don't have to iron this stuff when it comes out. I know the collars are gonna stay great. Everything kind of mixes and matches pretty well on the color side, and it just makes life easier for people like me that are just trying to keep clothes with clean stuff that looks good. So Holderness Bourne, can't thank those guys enough for sponsoring this. Back to the show. So that brings us to 2023 and the PGA Championship at Oak Hill. I'm pretty excited about watching the tournament this week. Oak Hill is one of the big boys, right? 36 holes, Donald Ross. Didn't start out that way. 1901, it was just 9 holes down on the Genesee River. That's where the Oak Hill name came from. 1909, they add a second 9, probably with some help from Donald Ross, according to at least one newspaper account. He was a golf expert cited that helped with that second 9 holes. But it was gone pretty soon. They built a couple clubhouses. They were doing well. But in 1921, University of Rochester, which is nearby, they needed room to expand. So because they were civic-minded folks, they agreed to give up their golf course land, which is in prime real estate right in downtown Rochester. The University of Rochester takes it over, and in exchange they receive acreage on the outskirts of town. They hired Donald Ross Donald Ross shows up, he routes some 36 holes. That's the Oak Hill that we have today. Pretty quiet place for about the first 30 years or so. It's hard to imagine Oak Hill today with all the major championships they've held and how kind of so much of the identity of the club is tied to hosting major championships. One of the people that held the thing together at the beginning was a lady named Ruth Berry McKinnon. Ruth Berry was the first female, and she was a pretty young lady at the time, to be a general manager of really a prominent top 100 type golf club in the United States. And she really kept the lights on and the bills paid all through, war rationing and economic turbulent times and everything else. So shout out to Ruth Berry McKinnon for keeping things going. It wasn't until 1949 that Oak Hill got to hold their first major championship, the US Am, but then they went crazy. These folks, they love majors. It's the identity of the club, and they want to keep doing it. So that's going to be pretty interesting if they can pull that off with the scheduling changes going on with golf right now. US Am, 1949. 1956 US Open, 1968 US Open, 1980 the PGA Championship is held at Oak Hill for the first time, 1984 Senior US Open, 1989 US Open, 1995 they host the Ryder Cup, not so hot for the United States, gooder if your name's Tron Carter. 1998 US Amateur. In 2003 they hold a second PGA. In 2008 they hold a Senior PGA. In 2013 another PGA Championship. In 2019 a Senior PGA, and now in 2023 another PGA Championship that I'm looking forward to. Golf course has held up pretty well. It's pretty much still the original routing. A couple key changes which we'll talk about right here. So 1926, about the time when Oak Hill is moving to their new location in Pittsford, this guy right here gets involved, and this is Dr. John R. Williams. I'm sure you'll be hearing about him quite a bit this week. He is a physician, but he is also interested in the study of botany and horticulture. He kind of single-handedly almost takes it upon himself to re-tree the barren property at his new golf course of Oak Hill, and he's basically got a playground for it. Long story short, all hell breaks loose. So Dr. Williams makes a decision. Not only is Oak Hill going to have oaks, but they're going to have lots and lots and lots of oaks. They're going to kind of become known as oak guys. He starts collecting these acorns to grow oaks from all over the place. He gets them from Mount Vernon, from trees that are originally planted by George Washington himself. He gets it from the Shakespeare oak on Stratford on Avon. He gets them from the Kew Gardens in England. He gets some from West Point that were planted by Calvin Coolidge. He starts growing these things in his backyard. He starts growing them in plots all over. He kind of comes up with a beautification plan. You can see it here. He's obviously very intentional with his work and how he wants to do this. And he pulls it off. He's planted lots of trees and they look beautiful. The problem though is he's planting trees that are sometimes mature, sometimes still lots of room to grow. And as they begin to grow, like at a lot of other clubs, they all begin to squeeze the golf course. So as early as the 1950s and 60s, they start to realize that they've got at least somewhat of a problem. They love their beautiful trees, but some changes are going to have to be made to the golf course, particularly because now they've caught on to the whole major mania, and they're horny for more majors basically, and they're going to do what it takes to get them. So they go through a series of renovations, changes, none bigger than what happens around the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th holes, kind of in the corner of the property of Oak Hill. So what you're seeing here is the par 3, number 5 on the East course. It's 180 yards long. It was designed by Donald Ross, sort of. This par 3 has been added on the front 9. It was inspired by the original Donald Ross par 3, which was removed prior to the 1968 US Open. There was a number of problems with the positioning of it. As you can see here, it was kind of in the middle of the golf course and it was crowded. The first attempt was to change kind of the routing of it from a south to north routing to a west to east routing. That didn't really help the traffic flow issues. For a number of years, they had built a second par 3 in the very corner of the property. After number 4, you would play to a number 5 hole to the right of the 4th green, and then number 6 would come back on what was originally the 5th hole. So they would have 19 holes for a while with both of them there. The whole thing was, as you can tell by my butchering of explaining it, was kind of a mess. What Andrew Green's been paid to do is come in and kind of sort the whole thing out. And really over the last several years, along with a pretty sensitive renovation committee, they've returned a lot of the Donald Ross to Oak Hill. And they've I think struck a pretty sensitive balance between Donald Ross's design philosophies, but also at the same time, they've done a pretty good job of making the course, suitable for 2023 Major Men's Championship golf. Oak Hill has had, obviously, a lot of changes. They've had a lot of different people work on their golf course. Fortunately for us, they've got some great historians there that have done a good job tracking all this stuff. So there's, I think Oak Hill might have more club history books than any club that I've ever followed. They've got Oak Hill Country Club, A Legacy of Golfing Excellence by Sal Marano. I hope I got that right. That's a pretty good one. They've got 2 books, From Little Acorns, The Story of Oak Hill, 1901 to 1976, right there. But I'll tell you what they got great at Oak Hill. They've done a great job of documenting all the changes to their golf course. So this is called The Evolution of a Legacy by Donald Cladstrup, and it's a soft cover, and it just kind of gives all the changes to their golf course up until kind of pre Andrew Green. This is like through the Ryder Cup. Kind of a new version of that, or an updated version, has been done, and it's just called The Restoration of a Legacy. Oak Hill Country Club. It's got all of Andrew Green's notes in there, and it's got all the original Donald Ross sketches and what moved and why and when it moved, and some of their thoughts on it. If I was going to only read one about Oak Hill, I think I would read this one. And then in the notes, you can see some other books on major championships held at Oak Hill, on other club histories written about Oak Hill, and other stuff written about Donald Ross, who designed Oak Hill. To sum things up, I think it's going to be a great major championship. I think the golf course is going to be good. I like playing golf in 50-degree weather, so I don't care if it's 70 degrees or 50 degrees or what. I'm very comfortable with that, especially because I got this great Holderness Bourne vest on. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think a bigger question is with the future of the game of golf and major championships. If a place like Oak Hill, which is just built to host major championships, and a membership that is bought in as much on hosting a major championship, if they can't do it anymore because of the calendar or because of space restrictions, what places really are left where we can do this? And for the parts of the country that don't meet those criteria, is it just tough luck for those folks and they don't get to see men's major championship golf anymore? I think that's going to be an interesting question. I know that some of the Oak Hill members that I interviewed in preparation for this week's major, they're very concerned about it. The identity of their course has been tied to that. I think it's great that Andrew Green has built them a golf course that is now fun to play and is not just focused on major championship golf. I think they've got enough, hole locations with some of the expanded greens and widened corridors and, not just bowling alley lanes because of all their big trees, so that hopefully the members have a great time continuing to play what is a fantastic golf course. I've gotten to play there before. That they've got a great golf course that they can enjoy whether they host majors or not. But yeah, if you're a person who lives in Rochester, you're starting to ask the same things that people in Chicago or in Birmingham, Alabama, or in Dallas, Texas are asking, which is, well, what's wrong with us and why can't we watch the best players in the world play somewhere close to us? I hope everybody enjoys this week's major. We've enjoyed putting this together, and thanks for watching another edition of Office Hours.